everyone for thank you everyone for joining us today. And today's session is about introduction to the Marketing Cloud. Why this session is, it's been for a long time I have been planning to conduct a full-fledged boot camp, like a training for somebody who wants to get started with the Marketing Cloud. But that's been long due because we do have the challenge of getting the licenses for the practice orgs. So it was not happening. I'm still trying. So I thought at least we will get started with the basics, get to know how each thing's how the features and the different products and builders, studios work. And we can get started, and maybe further down the line, we can have some detailed demo sessions about each and every product. And then if possible, we would be able to get some practice orgs, hoping for that. So this session is just the beginning. And today's speaker is Kerry. If you are in the Marketing Cloud space or in the Salesforce place, you would already know Kerry. Kerry also leads the London's Salesforce Marketers Group. And I happened to attend one of her sessions that she presented at the X-Force Summit. Is it right, Kerry? X-Force Summit?
Yes, yep, and that was it. That was the one.
Yeah, I really liked the way you presented in a step-by-step manner about the different products and the studios and the builders. And that's a nice way I felt for a beginner to understand, because in the Marketing Cloud space, there are so many builders, studios, which will be very confusing to a beginner. The approach that you followed to introduce them, I really liked it. So that's the reason I've been behind you all these days, because I only wanted to have you as the speaker. And I'm really glad that you accepted and you're able to make it. I know you have so many other things happening on your end as well.
Yeah, no, but I'm just grateful to be here. I like to talk about, I started my Marketing Cloud journey, and I, at the time, found it difficult to understand some of the pieces, or like piece everything together. So a lot of the talks I do about anything are like the talks that I wish I'd gone to, like been able to go to when I started. So that's what drives a lot of these. So I hope that people in the meeting find it useful, or just a slightly different perspective or way of viewing the information.
Exactly. And please feel free to get started. You can, I think you have access to share your screen.
I will share my screen now, and hopefully everybody can see that.
We can see. All good.
Awesome. Lovely, lovely. Okay, let me move some screens around so I'm looking at the right thing at the right time, which is awesome. So thank you everyone for joining me this morning. I know that, like, I'm joining from a different time zone, and I imagine that some of you will also be. So I appreciate you giving me the time, and hopefully you will find this useful. So this is very much a getting started, and as I mentioned previously, this is the sort of top-down view that I think I would have appreciated at the beginning. And as I go through the conversation today, then I'll highlight why that was and some of the things that are useful and signposting in that. So just to give you a little bit of information about me, so that you know why I'm talking about this and why it's of interest for me. So I've been working with Salesforce since 2005, which is quite a long time now. So I don't really count it in years, but I started as a solo admin, and then I've moved into consultancy. And in the last 4 to 5 years, I've been working in and around Marketing Cloud, most commonly in a sort of enterprise setting, and always actually with Salesforce. So it's given me an interesting perspective, and very much I work with organizations at the beginning of their journey. So they're just starting out with Marketing Cloud, and sometimes they're just starting out with Salesforce. So I find myself sort of explaining some of the elements or how it works, and I see the questions that get asked, and I see the questions that I asked, and then I try to help people understand that information more. So I've had a varied career, from either working on my own to working on large scale projects, which means I've been in a number of different situations. I've faced many different questions, some of them the answers I knew, some of the answers I didn't. I've also been lucky enough to be for the last 4 years a Salesforce MVP, so I appreciate that award. I have a number of certifications, which includes all the Marketing Cloud certifications, but also now moving more into the architect side and particularly around Salesforce. So I find that the experience that I've had on the platform really helps me with that. As JB mentioned, I'm the co-lead of the group in London, so I like to connect people, and one of the reasons when I was starting out was that actually I wanted to go somewhere and be able to ask questions or see other people that were working on the same things, or in some cases be inspired by what other people were doing. So it's great to see many of you on the call. And I think you've made a positive step forward if this is the beginning of your journey, or even if you're mature in your journey with Marketing Cloud. Being part of a community group is really good and important. And then I also help co-organize in a couple of other things. So they're called community conferences. So it's like a community group, but in a bigger scale. So some of them run for half a day, some of them run for a day, and they have sessions like this one, which are provided by members of the community, and they range in complexity and topics, so that other people who have learned can share their knowledge, and other people following on from them can learn from other people's experience. So yeah, I speak at events. I have had the privilege of speaking at Dreamforce. I occasionally blog, that's generally occasionally. And in terms of my own goals, I am now working towards or looking at the B2C architect path, because as I mentioned, I predominantly worked in large scale organizations with Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. So that's just to give you some context of the background and why this topic is quite important to me. So in terms of how we'll look at it today, like in terms of getting started, there are two sort of main elements that I think that are important pillars to consider when you're starting this journey. And as I said, I'm a very sort of top-down person, so I like to have a broad and general understanding how the pieces fit together, and then be able to go into the detail and understand how that works. And I think we're in a really great time where there is a lot of now Trailhead content. There are lots of other people creating and putting out content in terms of Marketing Cloud, but sometimes they're very specific about various pieces. And I even now I find it, I'm still thinking, okay, well, how does this all fit together? What are these building blocks? How do they work? Which bits work with which? So hopefully this will give you a little bit of at least a bird's eye view of that, so that you can start drilling down into the detail. So I think there are two main pillars, and that one of those is using the tool. And actually, so that's getting into Marketing Cloud, understanding what it does, how you do that in the tool, and the specific features and functionalities. And there's a path for that. So first of all, you can do the learning and you can get the practical experience if you work at an organization that has Marketing Cloud. You can use Trailhead and lots of other resources. And then once you start to have some experience and some knowledge, you can actually sort of confirm your knowledge externally by getting certifications. So that can be helpful in employment, just to be able to say, do you know what, this is the type of experience and the type of knowledge that I have. But in addition to that, there's also another stream, which is actually completely agnostic of the tool. And that is sort of understanding what I've described here as the success fundamentals. So if you're working in marketing automation in this time, then regardless of what tool you're using, you want to understand what it means to have a communication strategy. You need to be very mindful of subscriber management and preferences and consent. And also fundamentally, particularly if you're working with anything email, then deliverability is also really important. So I came from a marketing background, at the time when I was using Salesforce, and I've now moved into the technology space. And what I find is, like, because it's, when you get into the Salesforce space, you can be quite technology led, which is great because all the tools are there and the products are really good and it allows you to do things. But it's important not to just focus on the tool and also understand about the wider business elements. So, for example, just to give another analogy, if you worked in sales, you could give a salesperson a great sales tool, but that on its own would not make them a great salesperson, because they would need to understand, the nuances of communication, how you influence people, how you talk to people at the right time, all of those sort of things. So it's important to understand the wider context and why you're using a tool, so that periodically you're just checking yourself and you're going, okay, just because I can do this with the tool, should I be doing it? Is this going to get us the outcome that we want? So those, I think, are also an important element when you're starting this journey, to just be mindful of that. But before we step into any of that, there's just one other element that I want to touch on, which is particularly related to Marketing Cloud. And if you've worked with Salesforce, you'll be familiar with that platform. And Salesforce, the company, built the Salesforce tool, and they've built it from scratch. So they designed exactly how it worked, and they've built all the different capability on top. Whereas Marketing Cloud has actually come very much from acquisition. And the reason that I want to just highlight that is because we've seen a rapid growth in the technology and the capability of the tool, and it's extremely powerful. However, it does mean that all of these pieces started out separate and they've been brought together. So although when you use the tool, in a lot of cases, it will look as if it's all one tool and it will work very well together, there have been phases where that sort of element has come with time. So all the pieces have been added together, and sometimes some parts of it don't work exactly as you would expect, because they have all come from acquisition. So we can see from here that Salesforce started in 1999, and then they, in terms of stepping into the marketing space, bought companies called Radian6 and Buddy Media. And they were social platforms enabling social engagement. But then in parallel to that, there was a tool called ExactTarget, which primarily, at least initially, focused on email marketing. And then that organization, they bought a distribution arm and a reseller. They bought some capability that also stepped into the social space. And then they also bought Pardot. And if you've worked in or done any research around Marketing Cloud, then you'll know that, Pardot is still part of the Salesforce platform. And then actually that all came together when ExactTarget was bought by Salesforce, which has eventually become Marketing Cloud. And since then, they've looked to, bring new capability into the tool. So more recently, we've seen the purchase of Crux, which is a DMP tool. So that has been added to the suite of products. We've seen the purchase of Datorama, which is a reporting tool, which allows you to bring marketing data from multiple sources in, aggregate that, view that together, and take action. We've seen the purchase of Rebel Email, which has allowed interactive email capability on the platform. And we've also seen the purchase of Evergage, which is a CDP. And we're seeing how Salesforce are bringing that together and sitting it with the suite of products. So the key thing to take away from this is actually that the tool has grown rapidly. It's a combination of sort of pretty much like best in class capabilities that have all been brought together. So just because it sits under a Marketing Cloud banner doesn't mean that you have just one login and it's all accessible in one place, which again is important. And these, within Marketing Cloud, there are about sort of 18, something like that, different products, and they generally fit into two categories. So you've got your messaging and journeys, and then you've got your data and identity. And what I'll be talking about today is the messaging and journey side of the product. And I'll come into the capability of that. But just the elements that I'm talking about today is probably somewhere between, I don't know, I would say 30%, maybe a third of the overall capability of what you can do with, you know, all the Marketing Cloud products. But they are, in a lot of cases, the very sort of common products. So if we get into that, and the first topic I want to talk about is learning the tool. So to start with, I just want to talk to you about the building blocks. So within Marketing Cloud, and when I say that, so you can log into Marketing Cloud and you will see within the message and journey capability, you will have this type of capability. Now, that doesn't mean that every organization effectively purchases all of this capability. So you can buy some things and not others. So how it looks in the interface will depend on what the organization that you're working with has decided that they need. But in this setting, we've got a couple of concepts. So we've got studios and we've got builders. So studios are generally analogous to channels. So you can think about them as channels. So examples would be email, web, mobile, and advertising. So I would say that most commonly organizations start out with email. Now, that's not every organization, but a lot of organizations, when they take a step into marketing automation, start with email. And then once they're established with email, they might grow into mobile, and they might move into wider advertising and that sort of thing. So you'll typically find that a lot of organizations already have the email tool enabled. So it's important to be familiar with that. And when you start this journey, you'll find that a lot of the content is around email, and that's really a great place to start. So with email, you can send email, and we're all familiar with email, so you will have seen promotional and both transactional emails come into your inbox. We've also got Web Studio, so that allows you to create web pages, which most traditionally would be landing pages, or if you were to create a custom preference center so that companies, a person can choose whether they get emails or not, or whether they get SMSs, right? If an organization has a particular requirement, then you would use Web Studio and what is called cloud pages within those to be able to create that page that they could go to on the web. We've also got Mobile Studio, where you can send SMS messages, but you can also implement mobile push if you've got an app. And then you've got Advertising Studio, which is the sort of program, like the digital advertising that you might see on Facebook or Instagram and that sort of thing. So all of that can be brought together in the tool. And as JB suggested, you can link that with Salesforce so that you can start to bring together that, you know, that 360-degree view and really meeting your specific customer needs where they are on the channel of their particular preference. So that's an example of studios there. In terms of the terminology, there are some more studios, which I won't go into in any more detail in this session, but you might also have heard of, for example, Social Studio. So that looks at monitoring social channels and also engagement on social channels. And you might also hear, if you're using Marketing Cloud or in Marketing Cloud, maybe another common one is Automation Studio. So Automation Studio is not technically a channel, right? So, you know, the studio terminology can be used slightly differently. However, it is still a fundamental and important part of Marketing Cloud, but I'm not going to touch on that too much. That's today, because we're just starting sort of at the very top to give you some pointers of where to go next, what to find out more about in terms of the capability. So that's studios. We also have builders. So builders give you capability across the channels. So you can use each of the builders that I've listed here across all of the channels. So they involve contacts, content, right? So that's a difference, but I sometimes say one rather than the other, and also journey builder. So if we talk about contact builder, that's where you find your people and your audiences in Marketing Cloud. So you would go to contact builder, and in there you'd be able to specify and define some information about the contact model. So how the various tables of data that you've got in the system all fit together. And you can go and interrogate that data, and you can create segments from that data in there. So that's where, you know, all the audiences and your people live. Then you've got content builder, and that is where you create all the assets that might be in your emails or your SMS campaigns, or they might be on your web pages. So within there, you can create various assets like that might be based on, say, images or blocks of text that all get created in there. And because it's in most cases a very drag and drop interface, you can create that in a modular way, and then you'll be able to, you know, reuse that content across multiple assets, which is again very powerful. And Journey Builder is the automation, like the go-to automation place for messaging and journeys. So if you want to create a series of experiences for people across communications, then Journey Builder is where you build that. And it's a very drag and drop interface, and you can access pretty much all of those studios and those channels in that space. So that talks about, you know, the channels and the different capabilities you've got. And we're also talking about what is described in Marketing Cloud as data extensions. And those are the tables that you put all your data in. So if you're familiar with Salesforce, then you would know those as objects and records within that. But in Marketing Cloud, they would be data extensions, and they would be rows. And it's very analogous to potentially looking at an Excel spreadsheet. And you would create, you know, the fields and the columns in there, and that's where your data would live. And then there are a number of different ways that you can actually bring that data into Marketing Cloud. So one of those is Salesforce Connect. So if you're using Salesforce, then you can set up Salesforce Connect, and that can bring the data over automatically. And it can also allow you to push some data and some actions back into Salesforce, which is again very powerful when you're looking at these connected experiences. You've also actually gotten a FTP site, so in a secure FTP site, and that can allow you to bring data in from other systems and automate that. So for example, if you have another external system within your organization that has information that you would want to bring in or make available for your segmenting, then you can actually sort of automate the import of that information into an FTP site, and then Marketing Cloud can be either set up where you bring that in manually, or there's a level of automation that you can do where that data is brought into the system in the right tables in order for you to be able to use. And then there are also APIs. So if you were doing integration at scale and you needed real-time capability, then you might go down the route of actually connecting Marketing Cloud with your other systems via an API. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the fundamental building blocks, how they fit together. So I'm not going to step live into an org at this time, but next I want to show you just a little bit about what this might look like in the user interface. So when you log into Marketing Cloud, you will see, a home screen, and these will be the sort of menu options that you see at the top. And these are actually static. So if you were used to using Salesforce, then you would know you can do a certain amount of customization in that user interface, whereas Marketing Cloud, this is typically what it looks like. And even if you don't have access to some of these tools, the menu option will still be there. You just won't be able to click on it or go through to it. So as I mentioned, the 4 studios, I've seen them highlighted here. So again, email studio. So the types of things that you can do in here is actually create content. So this gives you a window into Content Builder, because you want to be able to do those sort of things in the place where it's most logical for you to feel or understand that you should do them. So the tool allows you to do that. You can create emails and email templates. So email templates is really powerful, particularly if you work on big teams. So you can create, a standard newsletter type template that might have a standard footer in it, and it might have a standard image, like sort of a format at the top with a header image, and then some content areas that other people in the team can pick up. And then depending on the use of the tool, like the use of the communication, you can actually, they can drag and drop content, like appropriate content for that particular mailing. You can actually initiate sends from Email Studio if you wanted to send something out manually. That can all be done from in there. And you'll also, that's where you would go and see the performance data of your emails. So it's referred to as tracking data. So you would go in and you'd be able to look at an individual email send and see, the bounce clicked and opened rate, and you'd be able to drill down to see which subscribers, might have bounced, and all of that sort of element. So you can see all of that from Email Studio. Now, if we go to Mobile Studio, in there, as I mentioned, that's where you can set up SMS messages. So again, directly in there, you would be able to send the messages. You would also be able to see some reporting about that. You can also access the content that's been available or maybe pre-created. And also in there, you can see, you'd be able to work with any push messages that you were working with if you had integrated with your organization's mobile app. And then we've got Advertising Studio. So in here, you go in and you define your audiences, you set up you link to the accounts, the advertising accounts that you have on various social platforms like Facebook and Twitter. You can create sort of, the campaigns around these. So, which people are you suppressing, which people are you targeting, and that allows you to action everything around advertising in there. And then the Web Studio is again where you create the landing pages. So this might be that you want to get someone to take an action from one of your emails, to either go and see some more information or to fill in a form. And this can be very powerful in terms of because there is capability within Web Studio, which means that if you take certain actions on those pages, that actually, as a result of that, you can write code, which means that it makes changes in both Marketing Cloud and in Salesforce. So depending on the action or the update that you want, that can be, again, a very powerful tool. And then we talk about the builders. So this is some of the builder capability that I talked about. So Journey Builder, I would imagine that if you've done any looking into Marketing Cloud, Journey Builder will be one of the first things that comes up, because it's really now one of the central places in Marketing Cloud to really sort of orchestrate what you want to achieve. So within here, you define an audience for your journey, and then you can drag and drop on various nodes, which allow you to either make decisions or allow get people to wait for a certain period of time before they move on to the next step. It sends emails, it sends SMS messages, it puts people into advertising audiences, you can also write some data to Marketing Cloud and your data extensions, or you can also say someone goes along a particular journey and has an outcome, you can actually create a case from that in Salesforce or create a lead. So it can be a very powerful tool in terms of bringing everything together and bringing your customer experiences to life. And then Content Builder, again, this is where you would start creating your content assets and reusing these, and having a consistent voice and brand is very important when you're communicating with people across multiple channels. So this can save a lot of time, and it can also allow for a division of work. So some people can create content and make that available to wider teams that might be working in different locations or in more diverse teams, to be able to pick and choose content that really works with their audience and their campaigns. So if you've done any sort of marketing automation before, you'll find that this is a very familiar capability in pretty much any marketing automation tool. And then under the node here, which is Audience Builder, you will also find Contact Builder. I always say that one thing and mean the other, but Contact Builder. So this is your people, right? And you'll see on the screen that there's actually a display there where the contact model in Marketing Cloud is actually contact centric, right? So you have a person, Marketing Cloud knows them around a set of attributes, which is an ID within the system, and also, or potentially their email address. And then all the activity based on that is connected back into that person record. And every time you send to someone, then Marketing Cloud knows that it's against that particular person. Now, this is in contrast to, say, Salesforce, which actually has an account-based model and is primarily looking at accounts and then sees people as underneath that. Now, if you work in a B2C space, then you're potentially using person accounts within Salesforce, and that is where that sort of aggregates that data together. But it's very important to understand that Marketing Cloud is contact based, and that also you might have lots of different types of data. So you might have data extensions which have people's order history in it, but then you also might have a data extension for maybe every email send that you do. So a person will be in the contact model most likely once, but they can exist in data extensions in Marketing Cloud multiple times. And if you've worked in a Salesforce space, then I encourage you to potentially look into that in a bit more detail, because it is a shift in the way that data is modeled in Marketing Cloud. So I've talked a lot about sort of conceptual things, but if you want to take action off that, each one of the studios now has a Trailhead. So you can work through each one of those, and I would encourage you to do that. So when I started using Marketing Cloud, there was no Trailhead for Marketing Cloud. So this is a huge step on, and some of the content in here is really important and really valuable now. So it's much more accessible to be able to learn the tool. It is worth noting that Trailhead obviously guides you through that learning experience, and the help. So Salesforce Help gets into, some real detail about, the considerations. So that's an important resource. But you'll also find that a lot of the conversations around Marketing Cloud have happened on the Stack Exchange. So that was a key place where people would go and ask their Marketing Cloud questions. So there is a wealth of knowledge also on the Stack Exchange, and that is a good place to go if you've got questions. Now, that's not to say that they're not also answered within the Trailblazer community, because they are, but there's just a historical amount of information on the Stack Exchange, and you'll find that that's where a lot of people who started with Exact Target and worked through that and have come through the acquisition and known the exact target tool for years, that is where they'll be having a lot of conversations. So here are some links for the Trailhead, and then they're also with the builders. We've got a comparable amount. So it's nice to be able to step out and see each of those in context. So a couple of things that you should know, as I've mentioned more than once, it's grown through acquisition. So in some areas, it's more tightly coupled than others. The other thing to be aware of is that it is a different architecture. So it's both a different architecture to Salesforce, if that's the platform that you're familiar with. And in some cases, because it's come from acquisition, all these tools were not the same architecture to start with. So that just means that it can behave slightly different if you're viewing it through the lens of Salesforce, which, you know, it was originally where I came from. There's also, and this is changing, but there is typically less guide rails and less, there are still warning messages telling you that you should, you know, when you do things, you should really think about this. But unlike we've now seen with the Salesforce platform, where they'll actually prevent you from deleting things or changing things because there's a dependency on something else, Marketing Cloud just does a bit less of that. So you just want to be more aware as you're working through it that there's just some of these extra considerations. In terms of life cycle management, now I did this talk or some along these lines last year, and at that time I could quite successfully say there were no commercially available DevOps tools. That again is changing. So we have seen more recently the release of what's called Package Manager, and that is a native piece of capability within Marketing Cloud. So we've seen that released, and what that now allows you to do is export the configuration in a JSON file and then import it into other Marketing Cloud accounts. And until that point, that was not really available as a commercial tool. There are other organizations also who have started to create commercial tools, and I know Accenture have written a tool, and I believe that they have made that externally available. I know that there are other consultancies who have written their own tools for that, but up until and still very much at the moment, there are within your Marketing Cloud environment and the different environments that you might have either for different business units in terms of brands or environments that you might have for production and testing, there are some things that you can transfer between those environments within the tool. And in some cases, you just have to recreate it. So that again is something worth knowing, because, you know, testing things, creating them in a non-production environment is very important, because you don't want to be, you know, making errors or providing your audiences with poor experiences. But just to bear in mind, when you needed to create or move that content around, there was a manual element where you have to recreate it. So that both has a consideration in time, about the time that it takes to create something, rather than just, you know, transfer it and deploy it to in a different environment. And also you can introduce a level of human error. So that is worth considering. And also in this setting, so I think that, you know, end users of the tool or anyone that works in Marketing Cloud almost has like an admin capability, because there are certain things, depending on, you know, your organization and the complexity of what you do, then there are a lot more considerations around how you might build something or the things that you might do. So creating a new email from a template is a relatively straightforward activity, which is effectively repeatable, and you could train someone to do and they could repeat that. But every time you create a new journey, there is a lot of consideration around that, about what that might mean and what that might look like. So so the depth of knowledge and the level of planning that's evolved around that is something that's worth considering. And just as a side note, there are still things called business rules in Marketing Cloud, which mean that there is capability in the system that might just not be turned on or isn't turned on by default. And in a lot of cases, you have to ask for that to be turned on. So there isn't options within the user interface for you to for even the admins to go and be able to turn that on. So it's useful to understand that just because you don't have something in your environment doesn't mean that it might not be possible. So it's always worth talking to support about that. So that was the tool. Now I'm going to talk about the elements around that. So you've got this great tool. You can do a huge amount of automation now, but really, what do you need to be successful in that? And what are the sort of extra things that you need to consider beyond the tool? And I think we've all potentially experienced a situation where we worked with an organization, maybe we haven't heard from them for years, like we bought something from them, 2 or 3 years ago, or we've got the occasional email, and then suddenly we're getting a lot more emails, and they've started contacting us on SMS, and we're seeing adverts everywhere, and suddenly you can actually tell that they've purchased a marketing automation tool, and suddenly they appear to have come to life. And they want to communicate with you in lots of different ways, but it's very different to how it was before. And do you want that level of communication? And are you happy with that? Are some of the wider questions to ask. So within this setting, I think there are 3 key things to consider. So that's, what is your communication and content strategy in the first place? So just because you can now send people emails every day at scale doesn't mean that that's going to get you the outcomes that you want. Because if you send too frequently, or you send content that isn't targeted, that isn't of interest to people, then they will quickly disengage. They will remove permission for you to contact them, or worse, they'll just get annoyed with you and make decisions to never interact with you again. So the key elements to this is, like, you've got a great tool, but you also need a great strategy and a good understanding of your audience to really be able to make the most of that. So the key thing is about really understanding, how your audience engages with you, what they're looking for from you, what channels they're available on, what channels they then want to communicate with you on, and for what reasons. So we'll definitely have seen that, there is now an increase in, so we've had email, but there's now an increase in people getting text messages. And actually Marketing Cloud has recently launched capability which allows organizations to set up and work with WhatsApp. But I mean, there's a wider question about whether people as a whole want to be able to interact with various companies, and what messages they might want to get on a channel like WhatsApp. So being very clear on, what you want to tell people, and then understanding their preferences, and really looking at the information that you already have, identifying whether you can actually answer those questions, and whether you need to do some more research or to go out and speak to them, or whether you need to trial things to smaller groups of people to really understand what they want and need, and what they're going to respond to is really important. So whenever I work with an organization that's doing this, they obviously have as an organization as a whole, they need to have developed a content strategy and a communication strategy of, what's important to the business, how is this strategy and these activities both strategic and tactical, contributing to that. But in terms of every campaign that's developed, I encourage people to, define a brief. And some of the core parts to that are going to be, what's the objective of this campaign? Like, why are we doing this and what do we want to achieve? What would be the success measures for doing this? What data do we need in order to do that? And that's both, do we have the data to be able to communicate with people, but what data do we need for segmentation and also personalization? If we have any of those elements. So do we even have those pieces of information? Because you'll see that sometimes within the examples, they reference a birthday campaign, which is potentially a nice idea. But if you don't collect people's birth dates, then you can't send a birthday campaign. And if you don't have a legitimate reason for capturing people's birthdays, then maybe running a birthday campaign isn't appropriate in the first place. So, you need to think about what it is that you're doing. And then once you've defined, what it is you're trying to achieve, the message that you're trying to send, then you can start to decide what communication channel that should go on. Right? So just because you can send people SMS messages doesn't mean that you should, because people expect more transactional messages rather than promotional on SMS. And once they opt out of SMS, then you've lost them on that channel. So you want to be selective about how that comes to them during their day. And then, as I mentioned, measurement. So really being very thoughtful and intentional about how you're communicating and when, because, you don't want to spend time and effort creating things that in effect are either not valuable to your audience, or in some cases are just frustrating people and in encouraging them to turn off. So that is absolutely key. Then there are a couple of other things which are more, they're sort of the building blocks of just working in this space. So subscriber management, and what I mean by that is working with people to give them control over how and what communications they get from you. So trust is a fundamental piece to any form of communication. So if you have, if you've said that you'll send them communications and then you send them something else, or you do something that they are not happy with, then they will take that information and they will have an opinion about your business or your organization that fits with that. So you really only want to be communicating with people who actually want to communicate with you. And we're seeing a lot of changes in legislation which give the recipients far more control over what their data is used for, and the different types of preferences that they have. And within that, there are a couple of different areas. So there's like, do you have consent in the first place? And then you'll find that some organizations go further and then they ask for like actual preferences. So that might be, do you want to hear about hiking, or do you want to hear about travel? And they give, a much more detailed breakdown of the types of things that people want to get, to give them a much closer and tighter relationship, so that they know if they do spend time and energy and money on sending you a communication, then that person is more likely to respond and take the call to action that the organization actually wanted. So things to consider around that is, the organization you're working for, the privacy policy, right? When people sign up and provide consent, what are you saying that you'll do? And particularly with an automation tool that's as broad as Marketing Cloud, where you can reach people on multiple channels, some of the things or the elements that take extra consideration around that is not how quickly it is for you to build the capability on the tool. It's more, how long will it take you to update that privacy policy and get opt-in from people in order to be able to have permission to send them those messages in the first place. So that is an important consideration when making any particular changes. And then the other one is deliverability. Now, this specifically talks to email. And as you know, I think most people have, a personal email account, and in a lot of cases that's free, and it's provided by one of the big providers. And those organizations that provide the email, the ISPs, are very keen that, their audience is not spammed, right? And that they get valued messages that they have signed up for. So we're seeing an increasing level of support around that, where, for example, Gmail will give you an option to mark something as spam, or most providers will give you and in order that you may have crafted the most wonderful message, and the people that are on your list to communicate may want to see that message, but if for some reason or another your internet service provider decides that actually that message does not look okay, then it's never going to reach the inbox of the people that you actually want to communicate with. So deliverability is something that it's very important to sort of understand. And there are a couple of levels with that. And Marketing Cloud offers some products related to that to help support with that. And I've realized I've got some automation here, but I haven't added the extra pieces on here. So the tools that actually allow and support that, one of them is called the Sender Authentication Pack. And again, you can find out a lot more information about this in the Trailhead, but this gives you a dedicated IP, a private domain, and it also enables something called link wrapping. So therefore, all the communication that you have is branded with the domain that you have specified, which rather than, for example, it just saying exact target, which it would do if you didn't have a sender authentication pack. And this then allows the and does obviously some work in the background around authentication as well, which allows the internet service provider to go, do you know what, this message comes from this organization, and they are who they say they are. So it's not being spoofed, which again is very important. So email deliverability is not something that you just set up on day one and then you ignore. This is something that, is a consistent part of your monitoring and improvement and performance improvement. And the internet service providers will change the filters and the criteria, and they will do that without any particular warning. So it's something that you need to monitor and keep an eye on. So you can have done all the work, you can know the tool, you can know how to set everything up, but if you're also not keeping an eye on that, then that will cause you to not get the results that you want. There's a concept of IP warming. So when you start with a fresh version of Marketing Cloud, you get a brand new IP. And again, your Outlooks and your Google, they don't know who you are. So over time, you have to start sending on a slow, like on a gradual basis, so that they understand that they can trust you. And what they're monitoring for is that the people that are sending the messages are engaged with those messages and they're not marking them as spam. So you want to start sending off smaller level numbers of email campaigns over a period of time, and you will start sending those to your most engaged audiences. And again, as I highlighted, like monitoring your performance around this and your deliverability is really important. And there's a lot more information on that, but the heart of all of this is trust. So if I go on to some of the materials that are available, again, like the Trailhead now is much, well, I mean, it pretty much covers so many things that it didn't to start with. So a huge shout out to the Trailhead team who are generating content like you wouldn't believe. But so you can now look, see trails again around content strategy. So that sort of highlights just how important it is for the success that actually, although Salesforce focus on the tool, they actually, you know, wants to help people understand why actually having a wider strategy is so important. There's information about the various privacy laws in various countries, and then deliverability. So there is absolutely Trailhead on that, but there's also some other videos. So Al Iverson is the director of Deliverability, and he ran a couple of sort of deep dive sessions. So they are really worth watching, particularly if you find yourself in an area where you are working in Marketing Cloud and may have some responsibility in that area. And then the other elements around, as talked about, the sender authentication pack, and there's also more information about IP warning. Now, there are a couple of trails that I've already mentioned further on, like previously, that also mention IP warning. It's just, I mean, as you start your journey, the key thing to remember is it's a thing and it's important. So you would need to be aware of that, particularly if you're working with an organization that's just started with Marketing Cloud. Some of the organizations that send really high volumes don't need to worry about that because effectively they're keeping their IP warm. But there are thresholds by which if you send less than that, you need to keep an eye on it and keep ramping it up. So that, I would suggest, is a whistle-stop tour of a set of products, which there are probably around something like 18, 19. But if anybody has any questions, I feel I've left maybe a couple of minutes, like literally minutes, for some questions. But if anybody has anything or any feedback, then I welcome that.
This is indeed a great session, Kerry. And as I said before, I really like the way you put it in a very systemized way, and it's easy to understand. And I appreciate that you included about the strategy to follow also. It's not just about the tool, it's the strategy we follow, it's the deliverability and how we establish the communications. So thanks for covering everything in detail. And I do see some positive feedback in the chat. And we do not have any questions in the chat window, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them directly. And would like to update you all that we will be coming up with the follow-up sessions as well. So maybe introduction to the email studio and all of the studios and how to use them. I'm still trying to get the practice orgs, but even if that doesn't work, we may have detailed demo sessions. So for anybody who can just look at the demos and get an understanding of how the look and feel, how the UI looks like in the Marketing Cloud.
So I think I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if the person who asked the questions is still on the call, but I will do my best to answer those because they'll be on the recording. So there was a question about whether the FTP site is owned by Marketing Cloud, and that is yes. So each, when you get a instance of Marketing Cloud, there will be an FTP that is specifically related to Marketing Cloud. And the reason for that is because it allows a certain amount of automation between and it is an FTP site, so a secure FTP site. And because it's tightly coupled, it allows you to do some automation where they can identify when new files have been dropped in and automatically pulled them in. So you can set that up, you can get access to it, you have very limited control over what you can do with it, because it's meant to function in a certain way for a very specific use case. But yes, it comes with it. And then, so and the other question is around whether studios are a bit like an IDE. So they are, I mean, everything that I've talked about here is within a user interface and is very drag and drop, and very sort of user friendly. So when it comes to, say, Web Studio, and when you're writing the pages for that, and like effectively standing up web pages, then you would be potentially writing code into cloud pages. What you do find there is that when people are working with that space regularly, actually they might do some of their coding actually in a IDE. So they might use, oh, my mind's gone blank. They might use some of the commercially available tools, which would also include linting. So it helps you with the language syntax and shows you where things are wrong. Sublime is one of the ones that I was trying to think of, but I couldn't remember the name. So if you are a coder and you do development, then you might have an environment that you're particularly familiar with, and then in that setting there are ways for it to automatically come into Marketing Cloud, or you might just copy and paste your code over. But you can't do things, if we're talking about development, you can't do source control as it stands, well, unless you're doing it manually, right? So you can, if you want to copy and paste things around, but it's not set up to work along those lines. So I'm not sure if that was fully the question, but everything I've talked about today is all available in the user interface. It is all as drag and drop as possible, apart from where you would actually write lines of code.
Exactly. Thanks for the details, Kerry. And I do have one question about how Marketing Cloud stands with comparison to HotSuite and HubSpot.
Now, again, that is an interesting question. And to be fair, I've not had a lot of exposure to any of those tools. So anything that I might say here is probably more speculation than, experience. But from what I understand, I mean, I think Marketing Cloud has a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways that you can extend that through coding. And I'm not sure some of the other tools have quite that same capability. And again, that would need to be checked. But in terms of enterprise grade, from what I understand, you can customize a lot more in some areas. But I haven't, my experience around particularly marketing automation is very much Marketing Cloud. So
I think I can add a little bit about the HubSpot. Yeah. HubSpot does some basic email capabilities. It has some of the extended capabilities, but it's very limited for a smaller organization which is limited by budget. HubSpot may be a good start, but in the future, if the organization is planning to expand and maybe using all of the extended features, like the advertising studio, social studio, and all of the studios, and the extensive automation, journey builder, and all these features, they come with the Marketing Cloud. So if the organization is not limited by budget, I would definitely go with the Marketing Cloud. Yeah. And we do have another interesting question, Kerry. And I think that is for you. As a consultant and with marketing background, what set you apart? What set you over the top? And why did you select Marketing Cloud as a platform of choice?
So I worked as a marketing manager for 7 years or something within an organization in a B2C setting. And that organization started using Salesforce. And they put in Salesforce, and I was like, I like what I see. So I sort of lobbied to become the admin for that. So my journey with Salesforce started with the core platform, but I was working in marketing. And this was quite a long time ago, right? So the capabilities of any of these tools were relatively limited. So I was using Salesforce for marketing. And when we were doing that, I would always be looking at tools like Exact Target or other tools and be like, oh, I'd really like to be able to, like, wouldn't it be great if we could use those? But in the organization that I worked with, which was relatively small, like there was just no, like we could never make the business case. And then I moved into consultancy because I wanted the variety. And I wanted to explore different levels of tools. And I'm just a really naturally curious person. Right. So I just want to know more about things, and I'm interested in how businesses work. So I'm just really interested in most things. And then I was within that, Salesforce bought Exact Target, and I was like, oh, well, I definitely want to use that, because I'd seen, on the other side of actually being a marketing person, what you could potentially, like, what that would unlock as the tools. And then when I was working in consultancy, I had the opportunity to learn more about it and be part of that. So I've moved into, Salesforce Marketing Cloud because of my Salesforce said background, but my interest in marketing tools and marketing automation tools has always sort of been there. I've just not worked at the organizations that given me the option to actually do that. And it's been a very interesting journey. And I do think they have strong, there's a strong appetite for growth in here, and some real, in terms of the developments that are happening and the new capabilities that they're bringing in. I think Salesforce are very focused on this area and trying and piecing all the bits together to solve some of those real problems that marketers had for years about, it's great, but all of this data is siloed, and how do we bring it together to actually activate it? It's like, we collected all this data now, we've either got too much of it to be able to work out what to do, right? Or we can't get it to the places that we need to. And we're seeing solutions for that, both in terms of buying Datarama and incorporating that. There's a connection and integration with Google 360 analytics. So that's allowing people to piece together all the different pieces, the DMP, the CDP, all of that area is slowly bringing things and connecting all the pieces together. So it's going to be it's a very powerful space to be in, I think.
It's great to know, Kerry. And there is one more question by Natasha about the, I'll read that out. What are your recommendations for handling the lack of a true development pipeline for all assets related to a highly customized solution? And that may need migration to another instance or another business unit.
So, this is a really big challenge in terms of DevOps anyway, I think. So my experience comes from sort of a contrast where I would work on a large project which would have Salesforce, and it would be so all of that. In most cases, you can describe the configuration through a metadata API, and you can draw that down, and you can do you can use DevOps tools and do continuous integration and continuous development. So people can, make their changes in individual environments. It can be brought together. It can be tested in automation and at scale, and it can be deployed. So we're not there with Marketing Cloud as it stands. They do get told it regularly, right? And I tell people things, and I know that there are other more development based people day in day out that have been talking about this, and we are now seeing a change. So the implementation of Package Manager, I think, is really a big and important step, and that's not necessarily because it solves all the problems at once, but it does show an intention and an understanding that when you work in this space, it's really important. So, I don't know that there are any simple answers in terms of this right here, right now, that the practicalities around, just appropriate levels of planning. So when I've been doing it, when we've deployed manually, then we've done that in pairs, right? So that someone is checking what someone else is doing, and that sort of thing. There are elements that you can do a manual amount of copying and pasting, but this step forward with package manager means that you can now effectively draw down a snapshot of what has been built. You can keep a history of that. You could potentially look to get back to it if you needed to. You can share it across multiple organizations. And I also like the DevOps tool that Accenture have also created, and I think Capgemini might also have one, although I'm not sure that's publicly available, shows the intent. So I think we'll see a level of acceleration in this area. I mean, I don't know that fully answers the question, because there's not a good answer to it, right? It's more of a, I'll just recap some history about where we are. So that's, yeah, hopefully that's semi-useful.
That really helpful. So I see, I think that's all we have, but I see some generic question that is related to the Datarama. I think about the new updates with the Datarama Advanced. Was that, where is that question? Was that scaled down to the version of Datarama?
So I have to say, I do not know a huge amount about Datarama.
Same with me, so I could not.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
So I think that is all we have.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go back to Natasha's question here. She mentioned deployment manager, and so deployment manager, I believe, if I'm remembering the terms correctly, is the package that you can install from the App Exchange. Package manager is a different tool, which is actually native within Marketing Cloud and goes a lot further. So if you haven't already explored, if you know deployment manager, but you haven't really explored package manager, then do that, right? Because that's where it's going.
And Kerry, if you have a few more minutes, maybe we can take one last question.
Yep.
I know this is a common challenge that we do not have the sandboxes in Marketing Cloud, and there is no testing area. So what are the best practices that we need to keep in mind before we really go ahead and send out? Yeah,
so I mean, as I described, like my experience has been very much in enterprise settings, right? So that does mean that in those, and because they're putting in Salesforce, and I worked for a large consultancy, so some of these programs were quite large and there was a lot of dependencies. So in all of those settings, I have worked with in a Marketing Cloud environment where they have had at least one business unit for testing, right? So that would be something that I am used to working with, and it does apply a clear level of separation. And some of the drivers for that were that, as part of these programs, they'd also have an e-commerce site which was being run by a separate team, or other integrations, and therefore it was essential to be able to test those integrations end to end in certain environments before it went anywhere near a production environment. Plus, they also might have had millions of subscribers, so you don't want to just be like, okay, here we go. But saying that, not every organization has that ability to do that. So I would definitely say that there are some pros for that, but some considerations. So extra time to deploy and all of those elements are considerations as part of that as a whole. There are some things that, harder to do than others in terms of trying to do separation and testing. So, for example, you can create a new email or a new email template and test that effectively in a production environment, and it can be very ring fenced, and there'll be no impact. Like, well, okay, no impact is strong, but you can really mitigate the impact that might have on your existing subscribers. But then there are some other changes that you really would be hard, like would be much harder. So any changes to the data model and the contact model, things like that can potentially interrupt journeys. And so I think it all depends on your scale and the organization's appetite for risk, but you can definitely set it up so it works, you know, as effectively as you can if you can get a business unit for testing. So I would keep revisiting that if you can, and make that use case. But otherwise, it's just really about planning. And you might need to think about, if you can't do that, then if you need to make changes to journeys, you know, what impact that might have, because you don't want people to be ejected from that journey. Or you might need to put in extra planning, so when you design the journeys, you understand, you also capture where they got to at each point, right, as a record. And then if anything, if you needed to make a change to that, or you know, and I'm talking about sort of big changes here, that you could always find where those people were and manually correct or manually intervene, or you stop them going into one and they come into another and you run two in parallel. You know, there'd just be just a lot of planning, but it also depends on the organization's appetite for risk. There are some highly regulated industries where they would be like, absolutely, this has to be spot on. And then in some cases you might have to do some sort of risk analysis that goes, okay, well, you know, 30 people never saw the end of this journey. How big a deal is that? Right. And that's only for an organization to be able to make their own decisions about the impact. Hopefully that helps. I mean, it's not an answer, but it is just a stream of consciousness, as in, again, there are no simple answers to this. This is where, you know, all the thought goes in, and the consideration, and the things that take the, you know, the time and the planning.
And that's our regular life.
Yeah, no. It means that people will always have a job, right? So there are positives to that, like in the sense that, you know, people that know Marketing Cloud and are, you know, in this space day in, day out, and are solving these problems, there'll always be a reason for that and a place for that, no matter how much the automation increases. It just means that the planning and complexity around that increases. Wonderful.
It was so nice having you, and Kerry, your information you shared and the insights is very, very much helpful. To me as well. I looked at the chart you presented about the acquisition journey. Oh my God, that was mind-blowing. You had all the data points together.
Yeah, so, no, it's very, once you piece it all together, you're like, oh, yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the acquisition journey continues. We may have more additions, more advanced joining the family.
Yeah, I would bet on it. Right, that's something I would bet on, is that there'll be more evolution and more purchases across the whole of the Salesforce stack.
Look forward to that. And thank you very much, Kerry. And today's session recording will be posted on the YouTube channel. We'll also send out an email with all the details to the recording and further events. So we do have connections coming up on June 2nd. Make sure to register to the session, and also all the user groups. I think most of the marketers user groups are conducting watch parties, and there's going to be some awesome swag as well. Be sure to register to the watch parties and attend the watch parties. And we look forward to seeing you in the next sessions. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good one.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time today. It's lovely to be here.
Bye.